I now reconvene the regular meeting council for Monday, October 7th, 2024. Before we get going, we'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the homeland of the Tanaka people. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda of the regular council meeting Monday, October 7th, 2024? Councilor Ray, Councilor Popoff. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Can I get a motion to adopt the following minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of Monday, September 23rd, 2024? Minutes of the regular council meeting of Monday, September 23rd, 2024. Mover, please. Councilor Peabody, Councilor Bassett. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. We'll move into bylaws. First up, Report 6.1, the first bylaw for consideration tonight, our official community plan amendment bylaw number 4124-2023 and zoning amendment bylaw number 4125-2023 regarding Oasis at the Dunes, Shadow Mountain East. These bylaws are back before council for adoption following approval from the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure. Can I get a motion that council adopt the City of Cranbrook official community plan amendment bylaw number 4124-2023, please? Councilor Popoff. Councilor Peabody. Discussion. Councilor Peabody.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if it's been mentioned in here, but there was discussion around the council table about maybe seeing that area of road being slowed down to 80 kilometers an hour as opposed to 100 kilometers an hour. Do you know if that is part of the feedback from Modi?
Through the mayor to Councilor Peabody, at our last discussions with the Ministry of Transportation, the notion of speed reduction had been brought up, and it's my understanding at this time they're not looking at it as an option. I think that it's highly probable those discussions will continue as part of the corridor study, but as part of this, it's not. Yeah.
Thank you. Further? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Can I get a motion that council adopt City of Cranbrook zoning bylaw amendment number 4125-2023? Mover, please. Councilor Ray, Councilor Blissett. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Looking at that report, that was an excellent report. That's as good as I've ever seen. Thanks very much, Rob. Great work on that. The next bylaws for consideration tonight are official community plan amendment bylaw number 4141-2024 and zoning amendment bylaw number 4142-2024 regarding Cabin in the Woods, St. Mary's Lake, St. Mary Neighborhood Plan, East Side. These bylaws are back before council for adoption following approval from the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. Can I get a motion that council adopt City of Cranbrook official community plan amendment bylaw number 4141-2024, please? Councilor Popoff, Councilor Peabody. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Oh, I'm sorry. One opposed? Councilor Blissett is opposed. Apologies. Can I get a motion that council adopt City of Cranbrook zoning amendment bylaw number 4142-2024? Mover, please. Councilor Ray. Councilor Peabody. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. There's one opposed. Councilor Blissett is opposed. Moving on to 6.3, the next bylaw is official committee plan amendment bylaw number 4165-2024 and zoning amendment bylaw number 4166-2024 regarding 2340 30th Avenue North. Staff are recommending that council not give second reading. and first reading to the OCP and zoning amendment bylaws. However, staff have provided alternate resolutions to provide the necessary readings and proceed to a public hearing for both bylaws if that is the decision of council. Before we get a motion, can I please have staff provide a brief overview of the report, please? Rob?
Sure. Mayor and Council. So subsequent to the last meeting of the OCP reading, staff had met with the applicant and discussed the ability to provide some additional information. So over that time, post our meeting, the applicant has submitted some additional information in their package outlining sort of the desired proposal, what they're anticipating on doing, a little bit more detailed layout, and a request to permit up to 50 park models within the RV park portion as part of the overall development plan. In addition, what the applicant has provided was a high-level cost estimate and design for what it would take to develop the development as a residential development versus an RV park, just for a comparison for information. And so, yeah, at this point, it's the additional information is there for council's consideration, and staff's commentary is largely the same with respect to, concerns about recreational vehicles being used for living quarters, and the items like RV campgrounds being used for affordable housing, and then some of the concerns related to things like the creation of campgrounds related to infrastructure, taxation, and those impacts on the city. And so that's why the recommendations are provided the way they are, in addition to land use considerations with respect to our future housing needs requirements. But we did provide the alternative recommendations, and there is some notation just under the summary of staff comments that there is an opportunity, that council has an opportunity to develop and adopt policies to address development of RV campgrounds and standards. Also is develop policies and bylaws to address things like taxation. However, we don't have those things in place right now. The only thing that really guides the development of recreational vehicle parks and campgrounds are sort of, I guess, call them generic zoning requirements that establishes sort of a minimum kind of roadway width, a minimum green space width, a minimum pad size, et cetera. But beyond that, we don't have any other bylaws or policies that deal with this type of development, as we haven't seen much in Cranbrook. So we just don't have them. But other than that, I can answer any questions if there is.
Okay, thanks very much, Rob. We'll get a motion on the floor and then we'll go to discussion. And if you see this is a little bit unusual, what we've done in the past. There's two options: that council not give second reading and to the bylaws, and the second option is that council, pardon me, I'm going to read it off here, so I apologize. That not give second reading, or get a motion to give second reading. Council, does somebody have a preference? Councillor Ray.
I'd like to move motion number 1 as per the report, that council not give second reading to City of Cranbrook Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4165, 2024.
Seconder, Councillor Bassett. Discussion. Councillor Ray.
I appreciate the additional details from the applicant. That was, very helpful beyond the initial information that we received. And that included a number of letters from folks who are either current residents of the current RV park or would like to be residents. Those are very sincere and heartfelt experiences that people have had around the challenges in terms of affordable housing. And I completely recognize and feel for those people. In this case, however, I think for the long-term benefit of the city, I believe we need to take a longer-term view, that we do have limited land for development, that we're in a new policy environment, I would call it, in terms of the new regulations from the province and how we're going to navigate those. So I don't want us to paint ourselves into a box where we had some available land and now we've put it to another use that might make things a little difficult for us. And I I think it's really important to note that, we have these important resources, some of which from our own city, some from the province, saying RVs are not recognized permanent type of habitation. And as staff have noted, in our current policy environment for our city, we're not set up to even kind of look at them as permanent habitations. So, and I guess just one final point, it's interesting that the zoning change is to tourist recreation, OCP and the zoning change, tourist recreation and tourist commercial zone. But when we look at the letters from the folks that have come in, it doesn't really sound like it's really not tourists. So just as kind of a layperson, it's kind of a contradiction in terms, because although the change is around tourism, in reality, it sounds like it's not about tourism. It's about, and I totally recognize it, but it's about people needing affordable housing. So I just think this is not our best tool in the long term to address our affordable housing challenge.
Thank you. Councillor Peabody.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Charlotte, if I may. The amount of property tax revenue that the city would receive from a recreational campground compared to the amount of tax revenue that, let's say this space was filled with a similar amount of modular homes, or if we actually tax these park model RVs as residential, as residential property. Is there a significant difference there?
Through Mayor Price to Councillor Peabody, yes, there would be. Land is, I don't have a number off the top of my head, but as a percentage of a property's assessed value, the value tends to be in the improvements. Land certainly has value, but the more significant value is in the improvements.
Thank you. Yeah, this it's a tough one to vote on. It's quite clear RVs are not a suitable form of permanent housing, but at the same time, what other option do these individuals have? Is there an alternative in Cranbrook right now? And there's not, but at the same time, I don't think the city, and Rob, you mentioned this, we don't have bylaws or policies or even, rules regarding tax for a development like this right now. So if this is a type of housing that we want to explore down the road, I think we need that policy and bylaw in there first before we entertain an actual development. But that's, I think, a future discussion. If we have 28 or however many modular homes there, not modular homes, but RVs there, that's the same amount of people that are using our roads, using our utilities and everything else. And I feel like they should be paying their fair share of property tax, just as anyone else would. Yeah, I think because we're not ready for it is why I'm going to be voting against it. And then, yes, fire safety is also a major concern. And then also ensuring that these units can withstand our winters too. I think that's an important thing we need to look into.
Thank you. Councillor Papa.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I've had some time to read the document. Good work, staff. Good background as well provided by the proponent. So what I've learned since is that this is going to be a strata, fully serviced road, water, sewer, fire hydrants, everything else like we have in other stratas, only this is RV park models. So with that, that's changed some of my reflection on why this might work. With respect to the available land concern that we have with our OCP and the provincial government, this is a very, very small piece of the overall available residential lands that are in Cranbrook. Just the Wildstone property itself of undeveloped available land that's available there is humongous compared to this very small sliver. So we'll have to pivot on that a little bit, but I think we can do that without any drastic challenges. Should we defeat the motion and go to the alternate, number 4, the bylaw, campground bylaw, Rob? What would be some of the important highlights of that, just so we can get a sense of why this might work?
So through the mayor to Councillor Popoff and council. So from the examples that I have experience with and some of the quick examples we looked at, campground bylaws often will establish like sort of technical criteria for things like infrastructure, how they're going to be serviced, what they're going to be serviced with. Now, granted, the examples that I've seen largely deal with rural areas where, you know, you're talking about wells and septic systems for campgrounds. But it would typically, I would envision it would look similar to what a mobile home park bylaw would look like, where you actually have the technical criteria for roads, services, fire, et cetera, sort of for the development of the park. The other portion being sort of the financial implication and stuff, though, that's something that we haven't seen too many examples of, or we didn't have time, frankly, to look into it. But that would be something that we would explore to see what could be done to offset, for example, whether it would be connection fees or something to that effect, to kind of versus what a house would pay. But just due to lack of time and a capacity at this moment, we haven't delved too deep into it. But that's generally what a bylaw would look like. So it would establish stricter criteria than what you'd see in the zoning bylaw, and then likely be able to require a permit. So it'd be like a permit process. So then the project would then be reviewed against those criteria to ensure that they're met before a permit is issued and the development of the site takes place.
Excellent, thanks, Rob. So what we're talking about is creating a bylaw that gives some more rules and expectations, accountabilities associated with this and or others that go forward, and maybe some recoveries of costs and improved standards. So, you know, to me, that even makes more sense then for a development such as this, that frankly is going to sit as vacant land for a long period of time before it makes sense to develop out in that landlocked piece of property. How long would it take for that kind of a bylaw to pass council's approvals?
It would be a kind of, I guess I would call it a special project unto itself. It would require staff time to do the research and preparation, but there are examples that are out there that we would use to base it off of. And certainly, you know, if we're getting into the realm of discussing fees and charges and those types of things, that would be another discussion with council, perhaps. But at least from a technical aspect, you know, we would have a bylaw a couple months, maybe, I would think, if we were to allocate some staff time to it. The only thing I will mention is that if council was to move forward and approve the zoning, this goes all well and the zoning gets approved, and then you give us direction to create the bylaw, and then they come in and apply, this development would be kind of considered non-conforming because it would likely take place and transpire before those bylaws were in effect. So that's just the one consideration, but I would anticipate it would probably take a couple of months of time before we could have a draft to present.
So what I'm hearing is we're going to follow some best practices. If we go forward with this campground bylaw, it's going to be hopefully a win-win for both this and future proponents, as well as for the city, to alleviate some of the challenges staff identified. And, you know, there's a short-term need for allowing people to stay in Cranbrook while they're trying to build their deposit or their other challenges, which we saw in some of those letters. So you're right, Councillor Peabody, it's not black and white, it's a shade of gray, but I think we need this, and given the proposed bylaw that we might be able to work on prior to allowing this to go forward, I think it's a win-win. Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing further from council. We'll just add a couple of comments here. These are park models. These aren't trailers. You know, anybody who's traveled throughout North America, there's a lot of other jurisdictions where park models are recognized as a means of permanent housing in other jurisdictions. The standard is substantially higher than you're finding in trailers. We are told there's a housing crisis. And in Cranbrook, I guess our crisis is affordable housing. So market housing is taking care of itself. So affordable housing to the point where you almost need government assistance to be able to get into something. This is a solution where people can be independent and not rely on the government, not rely on subsidies. I look at crisis. How do you handle crisis? Well, Vancouver, Prince George, Kelowna, they're building tiny houses. They're a fraction of what these are. And make no mistake, they don't even have the amenities that we're talking here. The government's saying that's a reasonable solution to the housing crisis. Our housing needs report stated that the majority of our needs are kind of the bachelor, the 1 and 2 person. That's just what this fits that bill. That's ideal, 1 and 2 persons. As a permanent solution, I'd hope that none of the lower end solutions that we're offering, even tiny houses and whatnot, are not a permanent solution. But I certainly see this as a short to medium term solution. Fair? And I'm just going to read the last paragraph that the applicants proposed. The proposed use of only a portion of the land leaves room for future development. As well, no permanent structures being built. I will be able to keep the potential for the property fluid, allowing it to be developed as crime needs arise and expand. He's using a small percentage of this for this project. So he's open to the rest of it being fully utilized for residential. I really think that, looking at the taxation, you're not going to see the taxation you get with the residential development down there, but as CFO Osborne stated, you're going to see an increase in taxation. There's improvements on the property. And those improvements are going to be recognized by BC Assessment, which will obviously raise our ability to tax. To me, it's really, I think we're missing a real opportunity here that's in front of us tonight. I have a bad feeling that if we don't accept something a little out of the norm, or a little bit different than what we're used to in the past, because it is a crisis, this is lower end market that we're talking about. If we miss an opportunity, where are these people going to go? If you look on the 401, recently they were going to do some highway improvements on the 401 going into Vancouver. They had to remove, I don't know, dozens and dozens and dozens of motorhomes and what that are parked in the pullouts, so that you can even use them with pullout anymore. That's where they're setting up their homes. These are homes to these people, and these people that were set up on the 401, by the way, work for a living. They're driving in somewhere to work or whatnot. I mean, this is permanent for these people. So I really think we're missing opportunity. And I read all the letters that were submitted, and if you read all of them, it's really hard to argue with the need based on the benefit. And if you look at the testaments, the benefit testaments of the letters of support, man, these people are living in a reality that this is the only affordable way they can get a roof over their heads. That's stated more than once in these letters. It's the only affordable way that they can be independent. Personally, I think if we turn this opportunity down, I personally believe we'll live to regret it, and not very far down the road. Thank you. Councillor Bassett.
So along, as was mentioned, we're talking about park models. Why would this then be zoned as tourist recreation? Why couldn't it be like some of our other developments in town where we have mobile homes? Why would it not go under that designation?
So through the mayor to Councillor Blissett. So right now, the way our zoning bylaw is, the only zone we have that allows for recreational vehicle parks essentially is the CD or the C6 zone and our I think the P1 or P2 where the city campground is, for example, is a campground use. Otherwise, you get into the next closest would be the R7, off the top of my head, would be R7 and R8, which are kind of the mobile home zones. And so those, the R8 is a mobile home park style, so they don't own the land under them. And then a mobile home park bylaw would apply to that. And then the R7 is the closest example. The most recent one would be the lands above Farbrook, where those are largely mobile homes on owned parcels.
So why would this development not fit into, couldn't we make it into R7 or R8 with those park models?
So the park models are not a permissible use in those zones.
Okay,
And so that's the distinguishing factor. And then so if we were to say, let's do park models in R7 or R8, for example, that means any mobile home park or any R7 subdivision, the city of Cranbrook can then use park models. The only other option that would truly, I guess, kind of bridge the gap then would be to look at a custom sort of a CD zone or something that would be site specific to this type of development, specific to the type of uses like park models and recreational vehicles, and then have corresponding regulations for them, which would differentiate them from, say, a campground that could be built out at Mission Hills Golf Course, for example, which is also the C6 zone. So we're not that evolved or that finesse with our zoning to have that. We're dealing with a bylaw that's from 1996, and these are sort of new and emerging trends, if you want to call them, or options. So that would be the other option, perhaps would be to that we would do a custom zone. Now, with this proposal, you know, the park model is the 50 is limited to this site. It's site specific. So any other properties that are zoned C6 in Cranbrook, I think there's only the one, but it would only be to this site. So no other campgrounds or RV parks developed in Cranbrook could have the 50. They can have the 10, but not the 50. And then for the remainder of the site, it just would be developed as a recreational vehicle park and has the standards that developers for an RV park, and the proposal, you know, it does appear to exceed the basic standards of our zoning bylaw. So he has done that. And I do, you know, we'll give credit to the developer from the start of the original RV park in terms of how he's developed his development. But that was his choice to do it that way. Under the current zoning, someone could go to the minimum standard. So that's really where we're at, is just we don't have anything that would be specific. It could be done by all means. That certainly could be done, where you would create a site specific type of zone for something that's tailored more to this rather than, you know, a commercial overnight stay recreational vehicle park. I will note though that a portion of the proposal that the applicant has provided does have sites for overnight transient guests as well. So he did include some of that as well. So he's kind of got a few different, I guess, ways of proposing what he's got. So that is unique. It's just we don't have zones that are that unique. So it's trying to fit what would best fit. And this is the closest we have.
CFO Osborne has a comment, then I'll go to Councillor Peabody.
Thank you, Mayor Price. I just want to clarify, I may have misspoken in my response to your question. Was the question specifically about park models and whether or not they are considered an improvement that will be taxed on the land?
No, not necessarily. I think my question was more related to, should these park models be taxed as a residence as opposed to just one large lot taxed as a campground? Because if you have people living there full time, they're taking just as much advantage of our city utilities as someone who is paying property tax. So I just feel like if you have individuals living in units full time and they're using our sewage, they're using our electricity, they're using anything that we have, yeah, I just want to make sure they're paying their fair share.
We were just having a discussion back and forth whether or not BC Assessment considers park models improvements on the land. We don't have a definitive answer to that. The answer is maybe no. So it's no different than putting an RV on that piece of land, but we would have to come back to council and be more specific. Whether a person lives in a park model all year or not, I'm not sure if BC Assessment sees that as a defining, or what defines whether or not it becomes an attached improvement to the land, like even a mobile home. So if that is going to affect council's decision, then it may be worthwhile for us to have a discussion with BC Assessment to see, whether or not indeed a park model would justify or would become an improvement, a taxable improvement. We think maybe not.
Thank you.
Councillor Ray.
I'm wondering if we should maybe consider a motion to defer. So I know this issue, has come to the table a couple of times, I think now, but our CFO has just identified, I think, a key item of information that we would benefit from. And the other thought I'm having in terms of a deferral is, I think a couple of us have touched on that we're operating in a little bit of a bylaw vacuum. We don't have a bylaw that currently fits this. And we know as a governance body, kind of our main job is to be policy focused. So I would really like to see us, I think, have a bylaw in place before we move forward with further consideration of this motion. So I'd like to put forward a motion to defer pending further information from the CFO from BC Assessment, and with the proposal to bring forward a bylaw before further consideration of this issue.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to defer. Can I get a second to Councillor Popoff? Discussion. Councillor Peabody.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, this is still a question related to the last motion on the floor. Rob, what is the difference in the investment from this developer to put in a modular home or modular homes in these properties compared to a park model? I know in the past, council's made exceptions of not having a full concrete foundation, allowing modular homes to go onto blocks as opposed to no foundation. What's the benefit here to go to a park model as opposed to a modular home? And should we be pushing for modular homes in this property?
So through the mayor to council and Councillor Peabody, I think so in the examples that were provided by the applicant, there's different levels of park model. Park models are a CSA RV standard, but there are different kinds. There's ones that are on wheels, there's ones that are not. We have experience with 10 or I think there's 11 in Cranbrook that we know of out at Mission Hills. That there's a whole different history with that. But they are a recreational vehicle standard from a CSA standpoint, so they're not BC Building Code. And so they're not, I guess they're not recognized as a BC Building Code built home, but they are a much higher standard than, say, a regular recreational vehicle, because they are, can be made more seasonal for different seasons. They, a lot of the examples that I've seen and the ones that were provided by the applicant, they are and can be meant to be more in place. I guess largely the difference, though, is if we were to look at manufactured homes, you would be creating a subdivision to our subdivision standards, like the example he provided from his engineer, or doing a mobile home park style development like an R8 like we have in Cranbrook, which then you could use manufactured homes or mobile homes. And so, they are different for sure. But certainly, as the mayor noted, they have been and are used in various places for all kinds of different scenarios. I mean, I think you go down to Phoenix and those places, there's probably thousands of them for snowbirds, etc. We have lots of examples where they're here in the Kootenays at some of the big campgrounds out in the rural area. So they're kind of an in-between of an RV on wheels and a mobile home. That's kind of the gist of it, is they're kind of that in-between point. This is my understanding of them. The biggest difference is just that the standard they're built to, which is the CSA standard, the Canadian Safety Association, I think is what it is, which governs those versus, say, a BC Building Code, which then would govern a manufactured home or mobile. Well, actually, mobile homes are CSA 240, so they're again different. So that's primary. I hope that answers your question. I'm certainly not an expert, but they're an in between. That's the biggest. And they do get put down. You can put them on blocks. I think you can. I've seen them on permanent foundations. I think that's the one example we have where we had a situation where they were put on basements. And of course, the applicant in this case has indicated he would be prepared to offer a covenant as part of this proposal to the city to restrict those types of situations from happening. So no other permanent type structures. So that would be something he did offer. So it is sort of that. It's allowing them, but not creating a situation where you're going to end up with a de facto neighborhood of just park models all on basements. And if that were the case, then really we should be looking at a mobile home park or something, right? Or manufactured home park, for example, like the one above Farbrook. So, but they do. I wouldn't disagree with the mayor or the applicants. They do have a place. It's philosophical. It's land use. It's a whole bunch of different things.
CFO Osborne. Thanks, Rob.
Mayor Price, through to the rest of council. We've just done a search on our database, and it turns out that there are these park models out at Mission Hills, and they are deemed improvements on land. So, it certainly seems worth asking the question of what, is there some specific criteria that makes them taxable versus doesn't, and compare that to what the applicant is putting forth. But so there is precedent here in Cranbrook that they are taxable improvements, not similar in scope of an actual home, of course, in terms of the value versus the land value.
Thanks, Charlotte. So I get a sense that that we're really trying here for something. It's obviously something that we haven't considered in Cranbrook before. So, in a motion to defer, and one thing I look at, from my understanding, the land that we're talking about right now, being developed for residential, from my understanding is way out there, a number of years before it's going to be cost effective for that land to be used for residential building. And the way I'm looking at this, because if this doesn't go, that land isn't going to be used for housing. Okay, it's going to sit there and it's going to retain whatever it is today. If there's some more information that we need to make this final decision, I fully support deferring it. I don't know what kind of a timeline, Rob, do you have any understanding what kind of a timeline the applicant's on here as far as, obviously there's a lot going into this, there's financing and whatnot, I would imagine. Are we on some kind of a timeline for a decision?
So I don't have the exact timeline. I do believe that the applicant does have the land under contract and had originally asked for an extension for the closure of the property because it's subject with all the subject twos. He is here. If council wishes to ask him directly, I certainly could do that, or I could ask him quickly and reply back. But I don't know what his date is, but there is time because he's a purchaser of the property. He doesn't actually own it yet, and I believe all of these approvals would be a subject to. So,
thank you. Councillor Blissett, or pardon me, Councillor Ray, the deferral, have you got a specific time?
So I believe the motion, and I know we have initial information from CFO, but would be confirmation from the BC Assessment Authority regarding the question. And then the motion also included that a proposed campground bylaw come to the table first for approval before moving forward with further votes on this particular application.
Or timelines for that ballpark? Yeah, that's significant. That's significant if we're looking at another.
Council, right through the mayor. I
Thank you,
think,
Mike.
yeah, I think that it is difficult. As council knows, we've got more than a full plate of work that's including many other bylaws that are in progress. The OCP is behind schedule, but mostly related to a lot of the items that came through the provincial legislation changes. Our zoning bylaw is going to be opened again. We're looking at several bylaws for development incentives. There's a big backlog of work when it comes to bylaw and policy development. Those items can be potentially shifted in consultation with council, but at this point in time, it would just mean a delay or a shift of resources for those items, or it would mean council authorizing resources for us to get some external support to bring a bylaw like this forward. Those are the things that we do have at play, because further delays, especially with those existing processes that are in place that do have consultants on board, it adds a little bit of time and money on those. And I understand it's nice to jump on these things right away. As Rob inferred, that could be a couple months, and that would mean us shuffling some other stuff off the plate with other policies and bylaws that are directly intended to support housing and development in the community.
Thank you, Mike. Councilor Papa.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So should we approve the deferral for those two topics to be completed? The reality is the developer, if it's still within the developer's business timeline and makes sense, they're not going to have the window for this fall to do the groundwork and do all that preliminary excavation. It's going to move on into spring 2025. So that tells me that if the developer is still keen to go forward, it's not going to be until the spring when we're going to be likely finished with the bylaw and the answer from our CFO. So that they might still align and be appropriate timelines. The only challenge I have and fear I have is that it doesn't meet the business numbers from the developer, and we lose this opportunity.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councilor Peabody?
Thank you, Mayor. Two things really quick. I wonder if it's best to defer this bylaw or to defeat the original motion that was on the table and then bring forward the fourth suggestion that Councillor Popoff mentioned, that council directs staff to prepare a campground bylaw and bring forward for readings prior to adoption of the OCP amendment bylaw 4165 and zoning amendment bylaw 4166. I think number 4, and I believe what Councillor Ray is suggesting is almost the same thing. I could be wrong. Sure, you feel free to respond, Councillor Ray.
Yeah, Councilor Ray.
I think they are the same thing. So I think it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Like in practical terms, I don't think they're different. But
Thank you. And then I guess my second question, Rob, yourself and staff, you have a good number of reasons why you're not comfortable with this development the way it's laid out. If council, I guess, if we send this back to staff to develop the proper bylaws, would you feel more comfortable having park models in this area? Or do you think that we're selling ourselves short and that we should, push for a better development in that area, something that actually does fall under the BC housing guides?
Okay, so this is through the mayor to council. So in our staff report, we were very deliberate in that we didn't speak to the development specifically unto itself, right? We don't have a problem with recreational vehicle parks. We reviewed it and we're looking at it from a higher level policy perspective. Some of the concerns that were identified, certainly the city having bylaws or policies in place and, whether it's working with the developer to create those standards, I mean, they will potentially be more cost to the developer in the development stage, but certainly that would help at least address or alleviate the initial concerns whereby we have nothing right now. So that's the trade-off, is we don't really have anything right now. These types of policies and bylaws would provide the city and the developer and any potential future developer for that matter of a project like this with more certainty as to what the expectations of the city is for this type of development. Every application, of course, is looked at on an individual basis. So we're looking at the merits you're looking at the merits of this application, and of course with the broader issue of housing. And I do, I will note, the mayor's point of view in that this is only a portion of the property. And so it's a tough one for us because we don't have a problem like with RV parks. The RV parks unto itself isn't really the concern. It's the notion of, is it going to be a full-time, purely a full-time neighborhood where now you have residents expecting services of a city, not paying, but those types of concerns that are the larger philosophical issues. And then from a development standard standpoint, because we don't have them, having these bylaws or regulations would certainly help address that. So would it give staff more comfort? I think it would give staff that we could give council, that there is more comfort in knowing that we are now setting a certain bar, that this development and any future ones would be set, that would have to be set so that there's a straight set of rules, say, that would be followed. So those standards can then be met. And then after that, it is really just up to council. I mean, we're trying to balance a number of different issues and interests, and land use planning is certainly one of them, taxation, but we fully recognize that council's obviously dealing with a much broader issue, which is how do you address housing in the city of Cranbrook. So we will do what council requests, of course, and by no means, and certainly it's something that, like Mike said, it is doable. It's not that it's not doable. It would require some time, but having those standards certainly provides a little bit more comfort in that now we have a playing field under which everyone knows how we're going to play and what the requirements will be. That's largely, I guess, the difference.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, Councillor Popoff.
Thank you, Mayor. So I guess this robust conversations has been very valuable, very fruitful. I think we've all learned something. There's some risks here maybe, but what I'm hearing is maybe we defeat the deferral motions that I seconded. We defeat the original motion to turn it down and go to alternates 1, 2, 3, 4 as stated by staff, which will take us to that same outcome, similar to what the deferral motion is going to be. So is that what?
No, that's not my understanding. Rob, could you clarify that, please?
Certainly, and I just wanted to add one point of clarification with respect to the recommendation. So the way we had written it is that it is proceed to second reading, advisory planning commission, public hearing for the OCP, same for the zoning, and then direct staff to bring forward a bylaw for readings and adoption prior to. So these processes, the way it's written like this is that if council were to want to go with this, they would be done in tandem. It's not much unlike the situation we were just dealing with Shadow Mountain. Their bylaws have been in a holding pattern for adoption for a year because of an external approval source. So, in theory, if council were to move forward with the recommendations as is, we go to a public hearing. If council continues to want to move forward, third reading could be given, and then you just wouldn't provide adoption until a bylaw is brought forward for council with respect to the campground bylaws. And then it would be an order of I guess, in terms of the agenda, they would occur at the same time, put it that way. The point would be that the bylaw for development of a campground would be brought forward at the same time as adoption of the OCP and zoning amendments, so that this development, any developments going forward would then be subject to this new bylaw. So avoiding a gap that if a person were to start the development sooner than later and got in the ground, then we can't really impose new bylaw requirements. So they can run in tandem. That's why it was written this way, because adoption can be, I guess, postponed or withheld. There's no, and that would be under the assumption that this other fourth item is going to transpire, and that's why it was drafted that way. So it allows the process of the bylaws to continue should council wish to go that way, rather than holding readings. We could get it to the point of at least getting through advisory planning commission, doing a public hearing, and then after that, the decision is made for third reading or not. And then If third reading is given, then you just wouldn't adopt the OCP. And at the same time, I do will mention that this zoning amendment will require Ministry of Transportation approval as well, because it is within proximity to the highway. So we don't know what those requirements might be or how long that could take. But as you've seen from the previous, depending on what the nature of improvements might be, we've been sitting on these, the one bylaw was a year. So there is time in that we're still going to be requiring approval of a third-party ministry as part of this approval process. And the referral process could actually be longer than us creating a bylaw for a campground anyway. So it's just that so this was done strategically so that if council wishes to proceed, it doesn't stop the bylaw process from occurring. The readings can be given. We can go through the sort of due process of giving bylaw readings, and then it would allow time in between the gap of the zoning bylaw being sent to the Ministry of Transportation as a referral, it going through that process, all the while the city staff will be working on the campground bylaw portion, and then ultimately bringing it back in one meeting with a series of approvals occurring at the same time.
So then what I'm hearing you say is if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, it's doable. It's going to meet the objective of what I think we've been talking about for the last 20 or so minutes. Is it the exact wording we need, or is it good enough wording to achieve what we're trying to achieve here?
Through the mayor, Councilor, I believe it is subject to Mike's comments with respect to all the factors coming into play with respect to doing the work. I believe, at least the way we've prepared it, it's doable in the sense that it does allow the bylaws to proceed to a certain level, and it does give initiation by council direction to staff to start undertaking the work on preparation of a campground bylaw, which would then all be brought back to a subsequent meeting once, the zoning bylaw, for example, if it gets to third reading, gets approval by Ministry of Transportation, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's the best I can offer.
We defeat the deferral and we defeat the original motion. We can bring this back and that'll achieve what you just mentioned.
Thank you, Councillor Ray.
With the permission of my seconder, I'd like to withdraw the deferral motion.
Okay. Thank you very much. The motion is deferred. So Marnie, so do we go back to the original motion? And then okay. Thank you very much. So the original motion was, can I get a motion that council not give second reading to City of Cranbrook official community plan amendment bylaw number 4165?
We have a motion and a mover and a second.
Yeah, right. That was, no, I'm just saying, that's as long as we're clear on the motion. I was just reading it so everybody's clear on the motion. Okay? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Motion is defeated. Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I move that we go to the alternative motions 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm not going to read them all.
So we'll do the first one first, one at a time here, I guess. Is it, Marnie, could we incorporate them all or just, no, I think we do each one on its own merit. Yeah. So I need okay, so the first motion. So can I get a motion that council gives second reading to City of Cranbrook Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4165/2024, refer the bylaw to the Advisory Planning Commission for recommendation and submit to a public hearing to be scheduled for 6:00 p.m. on October 21st, 2024. Mover, Councillor Popoff was the mover, seconder, Councillor Peabody. Discussion. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously. Can I get a motion, pardon me, that council give first reading to City of Cranbrook zoning amendment bylaw number 4166/2024. Mover, please. Councillor Lissette, Councillor Peabody. Discussion, pardon me, Popoff. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Can I get a motion that council gives second reading to City of Cranbrook zoning amendment bylaw number 4166/2024, refer the bylaw to the Advisory Planning Commission for recommendation and submit to a public hearing to be scheduled for 6 p.m. on October 21st, 2024. Mover. Counselor Popoff, Counselor Peabody, discussion, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. And finally, can I get a motion that council directs staff to prepare a campground bylaw and bring forward for readings prior to adoption of OCP Amendment Bylaw number 4165 and zoning amendment bylaw number 4166. Go over, please. Counselor Ray, Counselor Popoff, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Whoa, that was a session. Good stuff. Three. 6-3. Six, 34, yep. 6-4. Next bylaw for consideration tonight is the zoning amendment bylaw number 4169, 2024 regarding CD-4 Baker Park Development Zone. This bylaw is coming back before council for adoption. Can I get a motion that council adopt City of Cranbrook zoning amendment bylaw number 4169, 2024? Councillor Ray, Councillor Bissett. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Unanimously. Moving into reports, we have a bylaw for consideration is the annual taxation exemption bylaw number 4171, 2024. This bylaw is before council for first, second, and third reading tonight. I will proceed with a motion for the first reading before council and staff discuss the permissive tax exemptions and any potential amendments to the bylaw. Can I get a motion that council give first reading to annual taxation exemption bylaw number 4171, 2024? Mover, Councillor Bissett, Councillor Peabody. Discussion. Holy moly. No discussion? Councillor Peabody.
Sorry, I was waiting for the staff report. I don't know if there is one tonight.
Through Mayor Price to Councillor Peabody. Yes, there is a report. So it is in essence a summary of what we discussed 2 weeks ago, providing much of the same information and highlighting the fact that council asked to defer the decision about any amendments to today's meeting. So as I understand it, we're going to do the first reading and then and we have a motion on the floor now. We're going to have a discussion about whether or not there should be any changes to the schedule that was brought forward to council 2 weeks ago. And again, provided tonight for council's reference. There were a number of areas that we talked about last time. We looked at some recreation facility, permissive tax exemptions. We talked about some parking lot exemptions that have been provided. We talked about some applicants who have significant other sources of revenue. And then we also spoke specifically about the Alliance Church, who had requested 100% exemptions on the 2 parcels where there is no church or school building, and those 2 parcels have been split into 2 separate classes, Class 8 and Class 6. And Class 8, more or less, houses the paved parking lot, and that is the portion that staff are recommending be exempt. And the applicant is requesting that the entirety of both those 2 parcels be awarded exemptions. So that's sort of in a nutshell what was brought forward 2 weeks ago. And so tonight, the intent was to have some discussions about whether or not any changes were wished by council to the list that has not been adjusted for any of those things that I've just mentioned.
Charlotte, Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Mayor. So just a reminder for folks, so correct me if I'm wrong, CFO. we do these permissive tax exemptions, but it's not then that those taxes magically disappear. They're then redistributed instead of being paid by the organization, they're redistributed among all the other taxpayers in Cranbrook. So it's kind of a social contract that we say there's a common good served by these organizations, they're benefiting the community, and so it makes sense to support them by giving them the exemption and then spreading the tax burden around all the other residents of Cranbrook. Is that pretty much on track?
Through Mayor Price to Councillor Ray, that is correct, but not just residents, of course, businesses as
Yeah.
well.
Thank you. So my inclination at this point is to support what we're putting forward for this year. But I remember you noting that I'm not sure if it's a policy or a policy that guides this has been intentionally kept general. I'm just wondering we're a governance body, and so our job is policy focused. I wonder between now and our next budget cycle, if we might want to consider doing some work on that policy to make it more specific, to give not only this council, but future councils specific policy guidance on how to make these decisions. So for example, if we know we're getting lots of feedback from the public, concerns about increasing taxes. So what can the city of Cranbrook afford regarding permissive tax exemptions? So as I say, I'm inclined to support this year's bylaws as they are, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into them, but that would be my suggestion, to consider some policy work in preparation for the 2026 budget. So for example, we might want to consider specific criteria. So if you're a very large nonprofit and your operating budget is above X amount, then maybe your permissive tax exemption goes down by X percentage, something like that. Anyways, I think it would be worthwhile to consider that policy work for a future budget year.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. Councillor Peabody, Councillor Popoff.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the points you brought up here, Charlotte, was that there are some organizations here that do receive significant revenue, and a lot of that revenue comes from probably either federal or provincial funding. How do we single out the organizations that have significant revenue compared to the ones that don't? Like what filter do we create there? And how?
Mayor Price to Councillor Peabody. It was a very high level filter. I'm going to say, I don't know if it was $1 million, but certainly millions of dollars in revenue was sort of the filter I used because we haven't looked at that in the past. And some of these organizations have been recipients of permissive tax exemptions for a long time. And so there wasn't a particular target as, if we had something in the policy, and as Councillor Ray was suggesting, anyone with excess revenue or revenue in excess of so and so much. So it was more, when I took a look at it, I think you'll see that the lowest significant other revenue was 3-point-some million plus other. So there were a few that had, a few $100,000 in revenue, but the organizations that were identified were definitely the outliers. So there was, so, anything over 3 million.
Yeah. So I know in the past, in their recent history, I'd say, council made a decision to cut the tax, like the grants for tax, like almost in half, didn't we? And then we had some organizations like the History Center that weren't expecting it. And now they had a tax bill and they had no idea or any means to pay it.
Through Mayor Price to Councillor Peabody, yes, what happened was when we imposed the cap, which was new, we included everyone who receives a permissive tax exemption, including organizations that are on city-owned land. Unoccupied city-owned land is exempt. Once city-owned land becomes occupied, it becomes taxable. So, and a number of these organizations had been on city-owned land for many, many, many years, and the permissive tax exemption was substantial. So once we added up all the permissive tax exemptions, including those on city-owned land, we exceeded the cap. So the policy indicates that once we exceed the cap, we prorate. So, for example, the History Center had received a 100, everyone had received a 100% exemption for many years, and suddenly it became 85%. So the History Center ended up with a tax bill, which they were, they didn't know what to do with, quite frankly, because they had never seen one before. And we had communicated that this was being prorated, but perhaps not communicated it well enough. So what ended up happening was we directed the History Center through to the grant and aid process to make up the difference. So it ends up, you know, the intent was at the end of the day that, you know, no more than 2% of the current year's tax levy, and I say the current year because the applications we're considering are for the next year. So no more than 2% of the current tax year tax levy will go towards permissive tax exemptions and grants and aid combined. But because of the unique situation created by leases on city-owned land, the solution was to exclude those leases from the cap. Because of course, the result of unpaid taxes is that a property goes to tax sale. And we can't take our own property to tax sale. So, you know, so the whole thing is just a little bit challenging to deal with in terms of the land that the city owns and leases out. So I believe that's what you're
Yeah,
referring to.
that's exactly what I was referring to. And I think where I'm leading with this is if we do decide to do, you know, to decrease the tax exemptions, what would be the best means to do it that we're not met with some unforeseen surprises like we did with the 2% cap? And should we be communicating with some of the organizations that do receive significant revenue? See, like, what sort of impact, like maybe not this tax year, but the next tax year, what sort of impact would this have on your bottom line and services provided to Cranbrook if we did have you pay, if not the full property tax, but a percentage of the property tax?
Through Mayor Price to Councillor Peabody, absolutely. So as I said, a number of these organizations have been receiving permissive tax exemptions for a long time, not just the ones that are sitting on city-owned land, but also others. And in my research and in my discussions with colleagues, those types of things are certainly phased in or phased out, if you like. And yes, I think there might be some value in speaking with those organizations that we have identified that have significant income. The only challenge with things like that, or one of the challenges with things like that, is then assessing the answer. You know, if the answer is it will be problematic, you know, but you have revenue of $10 million or $3 million, who's going to determine whether or not, you know, whether or not the response is appropriate for continuing the permissive tax exemption. I suspect that there are other, I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think it needs to be done in combination with other things. I know some municipalities have said no more than one application per organization. So that would be one avenue. I also am aware that a number of the organizations are part of a combined, consolidated set of financial statements. So then we would have to decide if a set of consolidated financial statements means that you are part of one and only one of your divisions or whatever can apply. I'm not sure if I'm being clear about that. So there will be some decisions that would have to be made. And that's the struggle with making something very specific, is, and especially right now, because we would be trying to create specific policies around existing scenarios that have been in place for a long time. And, you know, if that's the case, are we looking at a 5-year phase out or a 10-year phase out? How long is this going to take? And what is the purpose of that? And, you know, yeah, so I just feel I feel like there are some steps that can be taken, but we will still need to make some difficult decisions in terms of who will be excluded.
So supplemental, if I may.
Yeah, bet.
And so I think for this year, like, I'll be voting in favor of accepting the tax exemptions as it is. But I would like to see, and I think it needs to be directed by staff, really what you want to see for the 2020, what is it, 2026 tax year? Going forward, and give us something solid that we can discuss and vote on. And whether or not it's, you know, a reduction in grants for organizations receiving significant revenue, or whether or not it's the example you just spoke about only having, you know, if there's multiple properties, they can only submit one. But I would like to see something come to the table. And I doubt it could be brought to the table for this tax year, but for next tax year, it would be great.
Thank you very much. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously. Can I get a motion? The council gives second reading to annual taxation exemption bylaw number 4171, 2024. Mover, Councillor Bassett, Councillor Ray. Discussion? Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So the staff's recommendation to accept the parking lot at the Alliance Church, I'm okay with that. But is this a one-off situation, or are we going to be now expecting in 2026 we're going to get a whole pile of more applications because we've set precedents?
Mayor Price through to Councillor Popoff. I'm not sure I'm following the question properly. Could you maybe?
Well, we're now including portions of a parking lot on a separate lot for tax exemption. Do we have other circumstances out there in our tax exemption nonprofit organization world that are going to go, aha, now they're going to be applying now if we should be past this?
Through Mayor Price to Councillor Popoff. Thank you for the clarification. I really don't think so. The parcels in question support a church and a school. Schools are typically statutorily exempt, including the land around them. And churches are statutorily exempt, the place of worship and the land on which it stands. And every other church in Cranbrook receives 100% exemption for the parking lot that services their place of worship. So I don't think so. And this is very unique. All the other places of worship are on one parcel. This is the only one that I'm aware of that has this characteristic.
Thank you, Charlotte. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Can I get a motion? The council give third reading to annual taxation exemption bylaw number 4171, 2024. Mover, please. Councillor Ray, Councillor Popoff. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously. We're moving into reports. Pardon me, the final bylaw for consideration tonight is the airport parking and business control amendment bylaw number 4172, 2024. This bylaw is before council first, second, and third reading tonight. Can I please ask staff to provide a brief overview of the report?
Thank you, Mayor Price, through to council. So this pertains to lease rates at the airport terminal building and bare land at the airport. So the airport manager has reviewed a report prepared by a consultant. It was prepared a few years ago, but the rates that are outlined in that report strongly suggests that our current lease rates are far below market. The strategy out at the airport has been to be very competitive in terms of lease rates, but we have gone beyond that now, and it's time to update those rates. And there is also a proposal to increase the rates 2.5% each year, starting in 2025 through to 2028, I believe, and then come back to council in 2029, in late 2028 with new proposals. The information that the bylaw is based on was a report prepared in 2019. As council knows, a significant the airport industry has experienced significant turmoil during that since that time, and so the airport manager feels that using those 2029 or 2019 rates, pardon me, with inflation accelerators of 2.5% each year, will retain the competitive advantage and ensure that the city's rates or that the airport's rates are not falling behind.
Thank you, Charlotte. Can I get a motion that council give first reading to airport parking and business control amendment bylaw number 4172 2024 is presented? Councillor Ray. Councillor Bassett. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Can I get a motion that council gives second reading to the airport parking and business control amendment bylaw number 4172 2024 is presented? Councillor Bassett. Councillor Popoff. Discussion? All in favor? It's carried. Can I get a motion that council give third reading to the airport parking and business control amendment bylaw number 4172 2024 is presented? Mover, please. Councillor Ray, Councillor Bassett. Favor? Opposed? In favor, Mike? That's carried. Moving to new business now. The first item of new business tonight is from Engineering Development Services Department regarding a disaster risk reduction grant application for the Gold Creek Dam. Can I please have, is that Mike or Curtis going to do the overview of this? Curtis? Floor is yours, Curtis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So yeah, this is just coming forward to get resolution from Council to support applying for the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. It's very, very similar terms to the funding application that we brought forward in July and applied for, that Council endorsed. Actually, during the final submission of that application, the funding manager for this grant brought forward saying that our Gold Creek Dam project would be a good fit for the funding. So we're just looking for Council support to apply for the maximum 5 million. As for the other one, if we are successful, we would need to fund the remainder 9.5 million to complete the construction. And this grant application would be compatible for stacking, so we could potentially receive this one and the one we applied for in July, which would reduce the overall amount the city would need to fund to 4.5, and we can still continue looking for other funding.
Great, thank you, Curtis. Can I get a motion to council support staff in applying to the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund at the maximum funding amount of $5 million to fund the construction of the Gold Creek Dam and the willingness to provide overall grant management? Mover, please. Councillor Bassett, Councillor Peabody. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Thanks, Curtis. Good stuff. Next item of new business is from Fire and Emergency Service Department regarding the Fire Safety Act and designation of fire inspectors and fire investigators. Scott's on the line. Scott, can you give us an overview of the report, please?
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the Fire Safety Act came into force on August 1st of this year. It's been around for quite some time, but they finally pushed it through just before they dropped the writ. And it requires that local governments, municipalities in particular, designate in writing through council who their fire inspectors and who their fire investigators will be. So this resolution that I'm asking for tonight just designates all of the positions in the fire department that would be appropriately trained and duly appointed as our fire inspectors to inspect public buildings in the community. Additionally, it would also designate who would be the fire investigators. So once there's a fire inside our municipal boundaries, we are required to do a fire investigation. And so those people will also be appropriately trained and appointed by myself.
Thank you, Scott. Can I get a motion that council designate the following Cranbrook Fire and Emergency Services staff positions as fire inspectors for the city of Cranbrook? Director, Deputy Director, Fire Prevention Coordinator, Fire Training Officer, Captain, Acting Captain, Team Leader, and Firefighter. And further, that council designate the following Fire and Emergency Services staff positions as fire investigators for the city of Cranbrook: Director, Deputy Director, Fire Prevention Coordinator, Fire Training Coordinator, Captain, and Acting Captain. Mover, please. Councilor Ray, Councilor Lissette. Discussion. Councilor Papa.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Scotty, all these designations, will this have any impact on salaries?
To Councillor Popoff through the mayor's chair, no. So staff in these positions are already doing this work. So it doesn't affect the collective agreement in any way. It simply is the removal of the local assistant to the fire commissioner badges that we were doing inspections, investigations on behalf of the province. That's gone at the end of October. And so council must in writing designate who those people are going to be going forward. But these were the same people that were doing them previously.
Thanks, Scott. Further, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thanks a lot, Scott.
Thank you.
Moving on now to administrative updates. There are two admin updates this evening. The first is from Public Works. Caitlin, I believe, is online to provide an update on the e-scooter boundaries. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi, Mayor and Council. This update is the e-scooter boundaries and no ride zones. So when we had the e-scooters brought in at the city, we did a delineation of no ride zones working with Bird Canada. This is primarily for safety purposes, so it includes making sure there's unimpeded access around hospital zones for emergency vehicles and patients, as well as mitigating safety risks associated with high-speed traffic on highways and preserving tranquil ambiance of areas such as golf and some of the quieter parks. Using that information, we identified a few areas through town. So all of the golf courses are no ride zones, as well as the former Tembec industrial lands. We wanted to minimize any e-scooters going into that area. We have Cobham Avenue as well, due to the high amount of industrial traffic, and Elizabeth Lake Park. That is primarily due to the park's trails being gravel or wood chips, and that is not a great way for e-scooters to be used. We also identified the skateboard park to minimize risks to anybody using the e-scooters at the skate park, and the East Kootenay Regional Hospital to make sure e-scooters aren't in the way of any emergency vehicles, and then a few undeveloped areas just on the outskirts of town, which are forested and dirt trails, as well as Idlewild Park. Idlewild Park is outside of the city's boundary, so that's not allowed to be included within the e-scooter program. We also have e-scooter no ride zones initiated through special events to minimize e-scooter use through parade routes. And we will be reviewing these zones as well as trying to expand on rails to trails, hopefully for the 2025 season.
Thanks, Caitlin. Questions, comments? Councilor Bassett? Councilor Popoff?
Well, thank you. So is the regional district office included in that no ride zone, or can you still use the scooter to that location?
We have the no ride zone start just before the regional district. So you could a few, probably like 100 meters onto that street and then park just outside of that strata area.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Popoff?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Caitlin, so these no ride zones are only for the Bird e-scooters?
That is correct. We
And-
can't control privately owned e-scooters.
Right, and thank you for that. E-scooters, bicycles, e-bikes, all the other things that are privately owned, we can't control any of that. And so I think we're creating a system where because we can regulate it, we will, but the vast majority are still the private owners of bicycles, e-bicycles, scooters, e-scooters, and other wheeled vehicles or wheeled instruments. And we're creating a two-tier system here. So I would be in favor of this if and only if we are finding that the e-scooter owners and riders are creating major complaints, creating hazards in our community unique to the Bird e-scooter relative to the overall number of wheeled vehicles in and around our town. I think we're creating this two-tier, and I don't think I think we're penalizing a private company just because we can regulate them, given that they're only a small percentage of the overall ridership in and around town in these areas that you're identifying. So unless we're having huge issues of safety and complaints, I'm frankly not in favor of it, but thank you for doing your work.
Great, thank you for that feedback.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. And thank you, Councillor Pawpaw, for your comments. Moving on, now we'll bring Chief Driver back for an update on the recent wildfire risk reduction initiatives. Scotty?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor and Council. So I did just want to bring an update on some of the work that was done in the area this season. So the city of Cranbrook had a number of grants, and 3 projects took place this fall. One was an unused portion of grant funds that were previously received. We were able to repurpose into a 10-hectare treatment out of the Canadian Rockies International Airport. That happened in early September. And then very quickly after that, we were able to accomplish a 33-hectare prescribed burn as well out at the Phillips Reservoir, just across the Gold Creek Forest Service Road from where the reservoir is. So that was a really ambitious project led by our staff. They wrote the prescription and were able to be the lead in carrying out that project. And so that was completed as well. And then very quickly, we moved on to Moore Park. And so lots of social challenges around Moore Park, but working with social service groups and through Marcel's office, we were actually very successful in making sure that everybody was taken care of on that parcel as well. Burn conditions on that 5 hectares of land wasn't perfect on the day of, and the humidity kept us from burning the entire site, but we were able to get prescribed fire on the land adjacent to where the businesses are to reduce that risk. Additionally, I do want to highlight a couple of collaborative efforts that are happening in the region. So this year was the very first year that the province of British Columbia held a prescribed fire training exchange. They held it in the community of Ackham, and they did use the Moira Park burn as one of the sites for their practical experience and training. And so they're doing the TREX program, which is the prescribed fire training exchange, to increase the capacity in the province to carry out prescribed burning like this, because we in the Southeast are doing a really, really good job of getting these projects off the ground, and it's been recognized that we have a lot of shelf-ready projects and they can learn from what we're doing here. So I'm proud of that. I think the community should be proud of that, and I wanted to pass that on. Additionally, the Ministry of Forests, or the district office, had a prescribed burn, a quite ambitious one again, in the Peavine Forest Service Road area. And I know most of the people in the community saw that smoke, and that was a lot of fuel coming off the landscape in a few days' time. And I wanted to just comment on the hard work that went into that one. There's about 2,000 hectares of treated land south of the community, and that was 40 hectares of it getting fire on the land to reduce the fuels and reduce the risk to our community. So I think it's worth noting as well.
Thanks very much, Scott. Good work. Council? Take care. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Moving on now to correspondence. There are 2 items of correspondence on the agenda tonight for potential discussion. Does council wish to discuss the items or receive for information? Receive for information. Thank you very much. And that brings us now to Mayor and Council's report and inquiries. We'll start with Councillor Popoff today.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. On the news recently in British Columbia and across Canada, we're hearing about emergency services, fire departments responding to fires due to e-batteries for bicycles and other things exploding when you're charging them in the apartment buildings, and the apartments are going up in smoke. Are there, I don't need the answer now, but I'm just curious, are there any decisions happening afoot to create some regulations on how and what and where you can charge and store your those e-batteries? CSA approvals for e-batteries? Is there any kind of conversations happening with this? We're another municipality that are probably in the same situation as others who have lost a lot of housing because of e-batteries exploding during charging. That's one question.
Can I just-
Comment on that?
So one of the things you should look at is the number of fires in gas engines, which is about at least 5 times as much. But there's a lot of press on this right now because it is new. So we have this a bigger issue with the traditional gas-powered engines. So I think it's kind of a moot point.
Well, thank you. And I'm not disputing that we have issues all around, but if this is one piece that needs some sort of regulation on what's an approved battery, I'm hearing that's the challenge. They're not maybe approved batteries or not meeting the standards of Canadian standards of these batteries. Just curious if there's anything afoot going on at more of a broader level. Also, I shared with CAO and Mayor the interest of the trout hatchery. They're interested in doing some expanding their fishing programs at Idlewild Park, but the challenges, of course, is the last half of the season, Idlewild is fully engulfed in water weeds, and that's not conducive to the trout hatchery doing some more programs with families and with children. So don't know if there's a workaround cleaning up the weeds in Idlewild, but there might be some really good, valuable family activities that the trout hatchery staff can work with to get that resolved. And I was at yet another very successful Bucks game, and I'm continually getting asked questions. Mike, what am I being asked about the rails, the handrails going down the sidewalk? Well, Mike, you're here, so I didn't see Trevor. But do we know if we're anywhere closer now that we're into the full hockey season to get those rails installed?
I think CEO Furch will speak to
Please,
that.
Mark.
So Mayor Price, through Councillor Popoff, Trevor and I do talk about that item frequently. So there's just the original plan and design that we were working towards and had a plan to have them installed soon. Sort of was based on the way the stairs were designed, that everything was done uniformly throughout the building. And therefore the pieces could be manufactured, knowing where that the holes would go and where the rebar and everything was under the cement, as they have to drill every single step going down. What they found now is that it's going to have to be custom all the way through because there is no uniformity in design of the way that place was put together. So almost every single place as it goes where that hole goes will be dependent on the actual conditions on each site. So it's going to take a little bit more work to get there, but Trevor's reassuring me that they are gearing up for that. But it's just, that was a bit of a setback.
Yes, big setback. So have all the rails already been built?
Well, this is part of the manufacturing. You have to have that spacing pre-designed into
But
the
if we don't
design.
have all the rails built, what I'm hearing from the seniors and those with accessibility issues, they say, we don't need rails going all the way down to the ice surface. We just need them in the top 5 or 6 rows so we can at least get into the stadium comfortably and safely. We don't need to walk all the way down and then all the way back up. So even if if they're not fully developed or built yet, we may not need to build out the whole thing, but just maybe the top 4 or 5 stairs to get them down to the first or second tier. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Popoff. Councillor Ray?
Thank you, Mayor Price. I had the pleasure of attending a couple of community events over the last couple of weeks. So I attended as a guest at the seniors lunch, so hosted by Cranbrook Better at Home and the Cranbrook Public Library. That is a happening event. So if there's any seniors out in the community, I would encourage them to go. It was a lovely meal, great fellowship. I had the pleasure of meeting one of our centenarians here in Cranbrook. So may all of us reach 100 and still be going out to community events. And then I was also pleased to attend with my husband the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So thank you very much to our friends and neighbors at ACCM for hosting that event. Very important occasion and wonderful to see the turnout at that event.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. Councillor Bassett? No. Councillor Peabody.
Thank you, Mayor. Don't have much to report, but just myself, along with some of the other councillors, we did attend the Truth and Reconciliation Walk on the 30th out at Occam with a large turnout. It seems like the event is growing every single year, and it is a powerful one, similar to the Remembrance Day ceremonies. It is one that I would encourage people to attend because the message that you get from it is pretty powerful and one that I think a lot of people in our community do need to hear.
Thank you, Councillor Peabody, and I have nothing to report. With that, we're at the end of tonight's meeting. Can I get a meeting to adjourn, please? Councillor Ray, Councillor Bassett, all in favor? Carried. Adjourn. Thank you.